Hey gumshoes! As usual, I'm just going to wait for confirmation of sound and then we will go ahead and get started. Wait for confirmation. And I have my confirmation. Okay, so I want to start tonight's live with a little bit of housekeeping. So if you are not joining live and you're not participating in the chat, I always include jump links in the description. So you can just click on the jump link and jump right to where I actually get started. For those of you joining live, particularly those who are participating in the chat, first of all, we love having you here. We love the community that has kind of developed around A Murderous Heart. We really appreciate, all of you coming. That said, we do have a little bit of an issue with the chat. The vast majority of people, you're wonderful. You contribute to the chat in a really positive way. And as I've said before, with pretty rare exception, I do scan through the chat because sometimes, I just love seeing the interaction. That's kind of like what I get out of this. But also sometimes people ask really good questions and I'm like, oh, I need to add that to the timeline, or I need to address this in one of my lives. And sometimes people drop little pieces of information that the mods and I are like, whoa, what's up with that? We haven't heard that. Let's chase that gopher down its hole. However, we had this issue early on with A Murderous Heart where I suspected it was primarily one person using multiple accounts, but they would come in and really cause a lot of distraction, a lot of chit-chat that had nothing to do with the chat, some shameless self-promotion of their channels. And so and I think that we're dealing with that issue again. So the mods and I were talking about just how, we have a little bit of an issue with the inmates taking over the asylum with the chat. And even when they urge people, please stay on topic, I noticed in this last chat, I went back through the chat specifically looking for this, and people were clapping back. They were saying that's why it's called chat, stupid things like that, where I'm like, it doesn't even mean anything. I'm in grad school, we have a chat. I don't go in talking about my mother or health issues or, my computer blowing up and stuff like that because, just because it's a chat. That's what, messenger groups are for, text groups. So, when people come in and you greet, that's fine. It's this, kind of concerted effort. And I did notice there was a bit of a network when I checked multiple videos. And so I made a list of, kind of the ones who really tend to take over the chat, those who pushed back, well, fine, we'll just go to this other, this other YouTube channel. And I'm like, that's perfect. Yes, take this crazy train down to the next station. That would be great. And, I say that in jest, but each channel kind of has its own personality. And there are some channels that do tend to be a little more chatty. But one of the things that made me a little less likely to give benefit of the doubt, having had this previous experience, and I just went through and just booted, before, early on, I was just like, this is not good. And so I just booted them. But this time I thought, okay, let me test something. So before, when this was happening, when one particular family member was mentioned, I noticed that there would be kind of a staggered entrance of different people. Hey, hi, sorry, I'm late. And then this group would just all start interacting and just completely go off the rails, talking about, everything but the topic at hand. So this time I thought, okay, I want to test my theory. So I went into a recent video where I mentioned that particular family member and saw the same parade. It was like this staggered, hey, sorry I'm late, and then all of this chit chat, and then pushing back against the mods, like, hey, why did you delete so-and-so's comment, and all of these just kind of weird comments. So just to let you know, so now we're going to we want to be very fair. Like some of the people who are clapping back against the mods, I really just wanted to boot them because I've been through this before. But just to be fair, I copied down those names, I put them in a spreadsheet, and just out of an abundance of caution, we are going to give people basically 3 strikes. You're going to be timed out once, timed out a second time, and then you're going to be booted. And if you're booted, that doesn't mean you can't watch the videos. It just means you can't participate in the chat or leave comments. So, we're not trying to be jerks. I just see that, like my mods, this is all volunteer. Like no one is profiting from this channel in any way. Even on videos where there are ads, I don't profit from them. That's just because there's a copyright issue and Facebook doesn't let you fight the copyright issues, and so someone has the option to monetize your channel, but I don't see any of it. And the same with my mods, like there's they're just coming here out of the kindness of their heart, but then it becomes really distracting for them because then they're having to herd cats in the chat and then maintain a chat outside, and so I see one of my mods. Oh, okay. Someone asked to push the mic back a little bit, and I did test it this time, and there weren't any problems. But I take a risk every time I push it back of it not staying in place. So I'll fight with this for a little bit, and I'll just try to stay back from the mic. Is that better? Amanda, maybe you could text me and let me know if that's better. Oh gosh. But anyway, so I don't know why it doesn't stay in place. Okay. All right. So having said that, timeout once, timeout twice, and then boot. But I'm not going to address this again. We're just going to move along, and hopefully everyone can, just be courteous. And yeah. So, having said all that, let's jump in. Tonight is going to move pretty fast, so I am going to share my screen. Okay. So before I jump into the content, I want to back up on something, and we're going to back up to January, and this I might have to do somewhat regularly. Oh, Amanda, I saw your text. Thank you so much. I might have to do this somewhat regularly because as I go through this material, I mean, sometimes something will, send me on a chase back into the FOIA docs, and I discover something new. And so we'll just kind of back up, and then we'll pick up where we left off. And tonight is one of those cases. So I want to play a couple of videos. We're going to go back to late January, leading up to the big brouhaha between Lori and Charles. So we're going to start off with this video of Melanie Gibb talking about the events that led up to that day.
So back on that Ned Schneider, when was the first time you heard that, the Ned Schneider?
So it was in January sometime.
Okay.
Yeah, and she was on the phone with Chad.
Okay.
And I was in her house. And I remember even just like where she was when she told me, I remember the spots. remember she was making her back door coming in.
Okay.
She went out and talked to him probably outside, and I wasn't listening to that. But then she came back in, and I knew she was talking to him. So she was kind of going back and forth, and then she got on the phone and told me about him and told me what Chad said, which was he came as an Ed Snyder person. That was in January before the 31st, because I know by then he already knew, right? Which amazing that she told him that was crazy.
Okay, so before I play the next video, what I'm trying to point out here, because she said the same thing in her interview with Nate Eaton, that it was just sometime in January that Chad had called Lori and had said that Charles had turned into this demon Ned Schneider, or this demon named Ned Schneider, took over his body, and he's no longer Charles, he's now Ned. So key in on the point of it was just sometime in January. So she keeps it really vague, but I am quite confident I actually isolated the date.
So Alex recovered it.
What they're talking about here, and when I created these videos, I started leaving on closed captioning in case, because it does tend to get a little muffled when coming from the computer to the microphone. But what they're talking about initially is them moving Charles' truck. Melanie said that Alex moved it from the airport to Lori's house. Now, April Raymond said that Melanie was the one who went with Lori, and Summer and Colby both said it was Zach Cox. And I tend to lean toward most likely, even though in most cases Colby and Summer are very unreliable, I do suspect it was, I've said this all along, I do suspect most likely that it was Zach Cox, just because you have two independent people pointing at him. Doesn't really matter. The other thing is that when Lori identified Zach Cox as having turned into a zombie, again, if my unredactions are correct, and we'll get to that in the timeline, she actually makes the point that he turned in February. And we also know from Charles that Zach Cox hadn't answered any of his texts or calls for 10 days leading up to January 30th, when he couldn't get into the house. So I think initially Zach was, kind of team Lori, or he was freaked out by, Charles going into obsession mode. But then I think he switched teams, and Lori felt very, kind of betrayed, very much betrayed. And so I think that's also potentially one more indicator of Zach having moved or helped her move the truck. But the important thing here is that Melanie is going to talk about what they did with the truck after it was at the house. And this was something I hadn't caught before until this week.
Yes.
And is that where you guys put his clothes to? Charles's clothes?
So let me try to remember the best.
Okay.
This is a little, I don't remember all the details because they were crazy and rushing, but at some point, let's see, I went over to her house, and I saw her box up his clothes. So she had a box that she put his clothes in. She put one in storage, back behind food storage, and then she took another one to DI, or Goodwill, and she dropped it off at Goodwill. And I was like, isn't that a bit, that's kind of overboard what you're doing? No, I just told her I gotta do this, Jesus told me this is what I gotta do. So anyway, and so his clothes were not in the truck. I mean, that's the only thing I saw is the box in behind there, and then the box that went there. And she might have done other things, but I don't remember what she did. I know she was going through some paperwork up in the office, looking for passports and, important documents and something about a computer, but I can't remember. I can't remember.
Charles's computer.
Yeah, I don't remember what she did with it. Did she take it? I don't remember if she took it, but I remember something about a computer, Charles's computer, and about money being transferred and things like that. And at some point, she wanted me to follow her. She's going to put the truck somewhere else. I'm trying to remember the details of this. So she drives it to a hotel in Gilbert. And she just parks it there. I don't think she was staying there. I don't think so.
She had said she was staying at a hotel.
She was staying at a hotel. I did see her at one hotel, but that wasn't the same hotel. That's what I remember. I think it was like a Marriott. I remember she said something like a Marriott something. Courtyard.
Okay,
Was that something right? I remember so. I don't remember. I might think it was hotel names or car names. Don't ask me names now. Probably, that's not my thing. So I remember she wanted to move the truck. She moved it. I remember she dropped it off. She drove it and dropped it off at this place. And it was right off the highway. It was like 202. It was right by the temple, like that 202.
Then you temple over?
Yeah, it was near that location.
Do you know who helped her with that?
Well, I was with her in a car. I was with her in a car.
So you followed her in a car?
I think so. Yeah, just me and her.
Okay, so the new piece of information here is that Melanie, who's now trying to play it off like, like I asked her, isn't this a bit extreme? And okay, first of all, the fact that she claims, Lori's like, no, this is what Jesus told me to do. That's kind of like saying like, no, Jesus told me like to just be a total bitch and like just destroy his life. Like, I know early on people were like, Melanie was just naive, but you can't be that naive. And we also know from her interview with Gilbert police when she went with Lori, they were reveling in it. Like Melanie was, she actually made the point, like, Charles doesn't have any friends, and he drove up in a different car that she didn't recognize. So she was trying to make it sound like, like, I don't know what that was about. It was kind of sketch, when she knew full well, because she went with Lori to drop Charles' truck off in a hotel parking lot and obviously drove her back. And it was the Hyatt Place in, it's called the Hyatt Place Phoenix Gilbert. And it was not the same hotel Lori was staying in. She was staying in another hotel. So for her to like go along with this, clearly she was all in. Like there was I do not believe that she was like pumping the brakes going, are you sure about this? Because anyone who, just a second. Anyone who has any kind of like conscience, I forgot that this was still on here. In fact, I didn't know that it would actually go on here. So I just was trying to pin it. Let me see. Oh, there we go. Okay, thanks. Anyway, so Melanie goes with Lori, drops Charles' truck off in this random hotel, and then goes back. But this wasn't just sometime in, this wasn't just sometime in February, as she surmises. Or sometime in January, as she claimed. This was, I believe, January 30th. And here's why. Because on January 28th, Chad had done this Google search for Ned Snyder, 1996, death, Louisiana, then Ned Snyder, Louisiana, and then Ned Snyder, Louisiana, born 1951, died 1996, and then finally bodies possessed after original occupant died. So clearly he didn't know this guy's name. He thought it was Snyder when it was actually Schneider. He thought that the death was in 1996 when it was actually in 1997. So then January 30th, Chad does an updated Google search for Ned Schneider, Louisiana obituary, 1997. Now, where would he have gotten this information? He would have only gotten this information from Lori. And he only had the updated information on January 30th. And January 30th just happened to be D-Day. That was when everything exploded and Lori blew up and took off. So basically, Lori was leading from behind here. She was feeding Chad the information, and either she got Ned's name wrong and the year of his death wrong, or Chad got it wrong. But sometime between the 28th and the 30th, that information was corrected, and then Chad was able to get the actual name and the year of his death, which was 1997. So where am I going with this? This wasn't just sometime in January, as Melanie kept putting out there. It was actually that day, the day that Chad that Chad called Lori. Melanie was there, and because Chad had just gotten the information, and so then Melanie was there when Lori lost her marbles and went and packed up not just Charles' clothes. First of all, and also they didn't just hide the clothes. Some of the clothes she dropped off at Goodwill. There's no good reason for that other than you just want to be absolutely horrible. And she also got rid of some of JJ's stuff, but she didn't pick up JJ, and then Melanie's kind of and then there's something about a computer. I don't really remember the details. And she does this quite frequently in all of her interviews. I don't know, maybe and she's just kind of floating it out there to see how much they know. And she didn't just do something with a computer. She took Charles' work computer. So she wiped out his bank accounts, and then she took his work computer so he wouldn't be able to work, and took some of JJ's things, like JJ's iPad, JJ's clothes, things like that. So Melanie was there for all of it. And I think that she tries to float out there, it was just sometime in January, to distance herself from having been there really in the heat of it all. Because I just don't think it's very likely at all that any of this took place before the that call took place before the 30th. Okay, enough about that. Another point I just want to make is, so I talked a little bit about Serena, I think in the last live. And I'm not trying to pick on her, but there was something else I was looking at. I remember telling you this week, I told Janice, I was I went through the FOIA docs looking for all references to dates, but I didn't go through the days of the week. So I went back through looking specifically for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, including their abbreviations. And so I found more details. And one of them had to do with Serena, but it was something that happened pretty late in the year. And so then I did a search for Serena. And so why would I do a search for Serena? Well, by way of reminder, or if you weren't in that live, Serena had told investigators that she was, somewhat in the group, very loosely. Everyone tries to distance themselves from this group, but that she had been kicked out in March. And so I was like, okay, let's see about that. So there were so many events that included Serena. I made a bulleted list, and we're just going to fly through them. And some of them I already talked about in the last live, but we're just going to go down them in order. So April 14th, she participated in a group call. Now, I'm going to talk more about these group calls in this live. I think that these were their castings. I think they had some castings in person, but then they were doing castings over Zoom as well. And I will provide evidence to support my claim, or why I think that these weren't just like, hey, what's up? What's going on? I think these were actual castings. And the only ones that we know about, we just happen to know about them because of Zulema's prolific texts. And so we only know about the calls where there was some kind of technical issue, or Lori hadn't shown up yet, or there was some reason that Zulema needed to text Lori about these calls, or about some of her interactions with Serena. And also, one of the things that I don't think I had picked up on in the last live, maybe I had, but she didn't just say she had been kicked out. She also said, and no one from the group would talk to her after this point. So, if you're so inclined, you can click through and watch those videos. I support everything that I drop in here with citations. So April 14th, she participates in a group call. May 4th, participates in a group call. Now, obviously, I didn't include her involvement up until the end of March, because there was also like a girls' weekend that she had participated in, and maybe a couple other things. But May 4th, May 5th, May 6th, Zulema told Lori that Serena was doing a study during this time frame. I think this was the one that I had found this week, and I was like, I need to dig into this more. So Serena was doing a study during that particular day on how to, quote, clear and clean Lori's home. And this was her home that she was sharing with Charles in Houston at the time, and, quote, get rid of the servants Garrett has. This one I'll actually open it up. Let me zoom in a little bit for those of you on mobile. Serena is doing a study today on what we need to do to clear and clean your home and get rid of the servants he has. And they were talking about Garrett. So by way of reminder, Charles was Ned Schneider. Then he became Garrett. And I actually found that date that he became Garrett. And then you'll see how he becomes. I thought it was Hiplos. I knew that the H was silent, but I just couldn't bring myself to talk with a Cockney accent. But I actually heard Melanie in the interview refer to him as Eblos. So that's apparently how they pronounced it. Okay, so clearly, she's doing this study. She's obviously trying to help protect Lori from, this monster, Garrett, by clearing and cleaning Lori's home and, all this stuff. So clearly, she's very much part of the group. May 7th, participate in another group call. May 21st, participate in another group call. First of all, and we'll see more details about this as we go through this, but look at the velocity of these calls. This really stood out to me. These calls are happening on a daily or nearly daily basis. And when you see this gap here, that doesn't mean that there was a gap in calls. That means there was a gap in reason for Zulema to reach out to Lori for some reason and talk about the calls. Okay, on May 25th, Zulema told Chad that Serena has, quote, stopped all her deep studies and is working on the cord Julie, and I'm assuming this is Julie Rowe because Julie Clement was a friend right to the end, and there was some big fight going on between Chad and Julie, so they had their little turf wars. So I'm pretty sure this was Julie Rowe and and she was working on some cord that she believed Julie Rowe had placed, I think, around her neck or something. And then, well, we'll just pull this up. This is pretty relevant. So Zulema, this is 5:25. Good morning, Chad. I spoke with Serena. She stopped all her deep study. So this was a concern that Chad and Lori had, was that Serena was asking too many questions. And you really see that Zulema, who Serena had said was like her best friend or one of her best friends, so she sounded like she was really hurt that even Zulema wouldn't talk to her anymore. But clearly she and Zulema were in very regular contact right up until November. Now, I don't know that they were in regular contact all that time, but their last interaction that was actually recorded in these texts was in November. So that was right up to the welfare check. So I don't think that Zulema, you see some concerns at one point, and we'll address that. But Zulema is very much advocating for Serena. So she stopped all her deep studies. She is waiting on Stacy to have a session with her. Now, some people thought this was a reference to Lori's deceased sister. This is not. This was an actual person. This was another friend of Zulema. And she was an energy worker, and Zulema tried to get her into the group. She texted Lori, she texted Chad, and no one was picking up what she was putting down. So, but apparently Serena was doing energy work, or Stacy was doing energy work on Serena. So she is waiting on Stacy to have a session with her, and she's working on the cord Julie placed. It's being suffocated. Can you see if she's still being attacked at night? Chad replied, the guy in the interview is 3L, so he seems to be seeking truth. That's about something else. I'm glad you talked with Serena. I checked, and she has cut Julie's cord, and that should help put an end to the night attacks. Zulema replies, yes, I told her to stop all her deep studies and only read that Book of Mormon. Is that about right? Chad, yes, that will help her. Zulema, okay. And then Zulema, thank you. But then Chad replied, Serena has texted me and still wants me to answer questions. I just don't feel good about it right now, especially with all of the Julie stuff going on. Any advice? Zulema, I'll call her today and be straightforward with her. She needs us to be forward and blunt with her. Can you talk sometime this evening? Something is bothering me, and I was wondering if you could explain some things to me. So some of these things, when we get to them in the timeline, we're just going to skip over them. 528. Okay, Zulema asked Lori to check in on Serena because another woman, this was Stacy, had told her, quote, Satan was upset about the knowledge she was getting. So Serena had her session with Stacy this morning. She told Serena Satan was upset about the knowledge she was getting and a lot of other things too long to text. Can you check to see how she's doing? So this is the end of May. And Lori replies, I will. And then Garrett was out for 2 minutes and crawled back in. We need to do it again, maybe tomorrow. We'll talk more about that. I mean, this is just so ridiculous. But you see here, Lori agrees to check in with Serena. Now, obviously, sorry, I just need to get rid of this text because I keep thinking that someone has texted me again. And so, okay, so obviously, if Serena had been an outcast, like Lori wouldn't have agreed to reach out to her to check how she's doing. May 30th, Zulema told Lori that Serena's fever is back and asked if she's being attacked. Lori said she'll work on her. So, just exactly what I said. You can come back, pause the video, and check it out more. June 27th, Lori and Zulema. Now, this is where you see the first sign of Serena really falling out of favor, or beginning to fall out of favor with the group. So, let's see here. So, Zulema said this June 26th, I have a question for you. What are these experiences that Serena keeps having? She thought that today she finished her physical. I don't know what that means. Is she moving forward again, or is she still at the same place? Well, Lori replies, hey, I have her at 33% physical. I called her yesterday to see how she was doing, but we keep playing phone tag. I don't know, that could have possibly happened. Sadly, whatever that means. What do you think we should do to help? Zulema, IDK. I'm just wondering if she's being deceived. It's hard to tell. I've mentioned, this is one of the most hilarious lines in these FOIA docs. I've mentioned being humble a lot to her, but she says she's being humble. It confuses me at times. And I'm just like, yeah, that's exactly what I would expect a humble person to say. Anyway, this is a dilemma. Lori, yes, I know. I just know that she hasn't moved in weeks, so I'm not sure what's going on with her. I'm asking and praying how to handle it. It's been a crazy week, but I'll try to concentrate on that today. Zulema, I see some tendencies of acting like those self-righteous people in the church. I also see how people in the church try to show off their kids to boost their, quote, righteousness. She said that she reads the Book of Mormon very fast, and there's extra blessings from that. So I'm wondering if she's being deceived, because it sounds like she's caught up in the cultural part of the church. Ooh, serious allegation. Lori, I agree. It's like she wants the fast track to heaven. We both know that it is through long suffering that the Lord works. It's His timing, and we have to accept His will. Now keep in mind, I mean, this is just days from when Lori very much does not exercise long suffering and does not wait on, quote, God's timing or accept His will, and actually has her brother kill her estranged husband. So, I mean, just the hypocrisy, it really boggles the mind. Zulema. So they're using that to get in and deceive her. Kind of like when I was mad at Kara. Kara is her daughter, but was a teenager at the time. They were able to come in and attack me. They will use any weakness or terror in our spiritual or energy fields. They're giving her some very real visions, dreams, and experiences. Again, this next, Lori's response is just ridiculous. Or she is making them up. I'm not sure. It's hard to discern because she is really convincing when you talk with her. I mean, like, are you kidding me? Like, you guys were all making all of this up. Okay. July 19th, Chad rated her trustworthiness 18 out of 100. So at this point, they clearly don't trust her, but there's no indication that she was shunned or booted. August 6th, she moved to the Phoenix area. She moved to Queen Creek, which is where Lori used to live. In fact, where she was living in 2018 when I visited. And then August 13th. Oh, yeah. Okay, this I'm going to open up. So Zulema texted Lori, I had a dream last night that I was putting my hands on Serena and I could see visions, and I started sobbing and blessing her with humbleness. Zulema, I also dreamt that I could actually have a man in my life and be vulnerable again, and this person was kind and loving and humble and nice. He was the kindest to me. This part really is just kind of heartrending, because this was just within days of Lori telling her that she was supposed to marry Alex. So then Zulema goes to the Lord and gets this confirmation. Lori replies, that's so amazing. I love it. Zulema answers to my questions. Lori, the Lord is so good. I love the way He confirms things to you. So in other words, He confirmed that Alex is supposed to be your husband. Okay, we don't know the date of this, but Serena had a lunch with Lori, Zulema, Melanie Boudreau, Alex, and Nicole. We already listened to this. This is where she was telling investigators, that it was like kind of to her chagrin that she moved there, and she wasn't moving there because of Lori or this group. They just had a word from God. They were definitely supposed to move there. And anyway, so September 21st, this is definitely where you see Lori being like in full paranoia mode, and I'll just read this. Lori, FYI, if anybody asks about me or where I moved, you can just say I moved in with my brother in Queen Creek, which is weird because he wasn't living in Queen Creek. He was living in Santan Valley. Especially those who seek my destruction. And then she's like, how are you today? And so Zulema, I don't talk to anyone about you at all. Did you tell Jules that you moved? I am going to meet when she gets back from China. Typos. I'm okay. I slept in today so I could get rest. I needed it. I'm going to the temple. I'm going to ask for protection and clarity. I was invaded with dark thoughts yesterday. This is very on brand for Zulema. She frequently thought she was being attacked, but much better today. Thank you. And then, wait, who's seeking your destruction? And then Lori replies, lots of people, Serena and Christina in particular, my family and such. Now, my personal opinion, well, I'll just read the rest of this first. Zulema said, that makes sense. Have you checked on Serena? I've been avoiding her and not answering her as I used to before so that I create some distance from her. I only keep in touch with Jules. Jules, I'm pretty sure, is Julie Clement. Lori, me too. I haven't talked with anyone. And so just going back to this, this kind of operates under the assumption if Zulema is being honest, which is a pretty big if, that meant that Serena was still reaching out to her. Then Zulema says, I think that's best that you stay hidden. I'm staying quiet as if nothing is happening. You are right. Are you doing good? Is the Lord saying anything yet? This will actually get more too, because that is actually really significant. So my opinion on this is, I think at this point, Lori was very much irritated with Zulema's friendship, that she had continued this friendship with Christina and Serena. I think, once Lori put out the low trust rating, I'm sure even leading up to that point, that they probably weren't including her in these prayer circles and things like that. But they weren't completely out of the group. But I think that was most likely more on Zulema's part. So I think that Lori was basically, because Lori is very much, you're either for me or you're against me. Like, you can't be friends with someone who I now see as an enemy and be friends with me. But I also see some passive aggression on Zulema's part. So I think that Lori was trying to get Zulema to break off her friendships with these women, like Nicole, Christina, Serena. But Zulema wasn't doing it. And I think there may have been some passive aggression on Zulema's part because, one, these women were probably a lot nicer to her. Like Lori, she would ghost her. She would just not reply to her questions. Chad would do the same thing, though he was a little nicer to her. But then when she needed something from Zulema, it was all like love bombs and stuff. So I think that Zulema was mentioning, especially the last reference we see of Serena. I just kind of feel like, no, this is a shot across the bow. But, anyway. Okay, so let's look at that one. November 7th. Serena was at the temple with Zulema and claimed to see Porcius, who Zulema claimed had appeared to her. So Zulema and Serena are at the temple. I don't know if they just happened to run into each other, if they went together, but Zulema thought that this person who she was married to in a previous probation had appeared with her, and she asked Serena if she could see her. I'll just read it. Let me zoom in. Zulema to Lori, guess what? Porcius went with me to the temple today and showed himself to Serena, letting her know he was protecting me. Isn't that amazing? And Lori's like, okay, I don't care about this Portia stuff. How did it go with Serena? No, keep in mind, Lori was on her honeymoon. So why is she replying to Zulema? Because she's concerned about this Serena issue. So Zulema said, I shielded myself. It was okay. She's struggling, still studying, even though she told me she wasn't. Her husband is being nice. And then Zulema followed up again. Portia showed up with me and she could see him. So Zulema's like, hey, just circling back on the really exciting part. If we could focus on that. Lori, that's cool. Did she ask about me or Chad? I'm sure she heard about his wife, right? Zulema, nope, nothing. I was prepared for that, but we only talked about her kids, her husband. Lori, that's good. Zulema, yeah. Lori, let us know if you guys are okay and having fun. So this is the last interaction that I've found that included Serena. Okay, now moving ahead to May. There were quite a few dates in the PDF. I created a PDF of all of the interactions with the catfishers. So I always start these. Oh, here, let me zoom in a little bit so it's a little easier to see on mobile, hopefully. I always start off the same, just in the event someone drops in for the first time. But in this particular one, sometime in May, Charles and the scammer started discussing her flying out to Texas for a visit. It says, in May of 2019, Charles commented that, and it was a redacted Gmail address, would have to book a flight as he had no way of doing it without Lori seeing it. And I'm not ready to tell her yet, but she knows we're done. She wants to be done too. He commented he had not, quote, been with Lori in over 3 months, commenting they, and then that whole part was redacted. So it seems to be a reference to they hadn't been sexually involved for over 3 months. And we know that Lori texted, I think it was Zulema, something about having had sex with a zombie twice. Anyway, so apparently that was before those 3 months. Then also sometime in May, Christy Cope, that was Melanie Boudreau's stepmother, visited Melanie and Brandon and said the home was filthy and unkempt with holes in the wall. She also reported that everyone was on an electronic device and Melanie would announce she was leaving for a couple hours to go to the temple. Now, one thing I picked up this week for the first time, it wasn't for the first time, but I had just forgotten this, that they had this belief that every time they went to the temple, their vibration increased. And when they reached a vibration of 1,000, that's when they could start teleporting. So, going into a portal and showing up somewhere else. And I think that's part of the reason they had this kind of feverish obsession with going to the temple. Okay, also May 1st, same thing, but in this particular chat, he commented that Lori didn't want a divorce and instead wanted to live together, but not as husband and wife. He also sent the scammer $1,000. She had, okay, this is a quote from that document. On May 1st, he commented that Lori did not want a divorce. She wanted, quote, to live under the same roof and not be my wife. She doesn't want to be with me anymore. I'm not sure I can do that. And then there was an image where he sent $1,000 via Western Union. So if something is in this indented quote, that just means like I literally just copied and pasted it from the FOIA docs. So if it's up in here and there are quotes, I am just like kind of teasing out some highlights, and then I drop the quote, but then people are free to open up the source and check it out for themselves. May 2nd, after being ghosted by Lori Vallow repeatedly, Zulema predicts in a text to Lori that, quote, something may happen to one of her family members. And this I talked about before, but I want to talk about it in the context here. So Lori sent Zulema a text. Hey, pretty girl, we are hanging in there. Just finished clearing the world today, casually. It's a big deal. You were there every day part with me. We are learning and growing in our powers every day. How are you? Zulema, I'm good. I'm starting to travel to the terrestrial realm at the temple now. Although today I had a very different experience and I had the feeling that something may happen to one of your family members. And look at Lori's response. Call me ! All right. Then the next day, Zulema texted Chad the same thing. So she gets this positive response from Lori and now wants to get a positive response from Chad. So Chad had told her on May 1st, now that you are above 1,000 vibration, you will sometimes travel to the terrestrial realm. And the temple is essentially a portal for you to travel there. So going to the temple increases their vibrations, but then for them, the temple is actually their portal. The group of women that you see are on that level. The reason he says this is that Zulema just kept sending him names like, can you tell me about this person? Can you tell me about this person? Is this person light or dark and stuff? And I think Chad just kind of wanted to get her out of his front yard and was like, if you see anyone, when you teleport, then you'll know, okay, yeah, they're light. So then Zulema said, were the 18 out yesterday by any chance? Which this is a weird reference, and I haven't found any context for, I think there were 2 references to this. So he clearly at some point had put something out there about 18. So maybe 18 dark spirits or 18 something. Just one second. Okay, Zulema said, I had a very strange travel yesterday. It was confusing, not like the others. So, she immediately jumps on this whole thing that, Chad had told her, you'll be able to, travel. And she's like, yeah, so next day, I had a strange travel. This was the next day that she, quote, had this strange travel. And then the next day after that, she was telling him about it. So it was confusing, not like others. Serena felt an attack as well. Then I heard a voice saying, someone in Lori's family is going to die. Now, Chad doesn't reply. So he doesn't reply at all. And I only included these adjusts so that you could see, like, he doesn't reply to that, but then... so she circles back like, a few weeks later and was like, her heart is aching and she doesn't understand how Serena could be indoctrinated in such a way. How does she make sense of it? And then they agree to talk. Okay. And then it's like, you're wonderful. I'm so blessed to know you, etc., etc. Same day, Venmo transaction from Lori or Tylee to Colby's account. May 4th, Lori, Zulema, and Serena, we already talked about that. They have a conference call. They have a conference call. We don't know who else was involved. We just know that Zulema actually mentioned Serena at this point. This one, the one on May 5th, this is what convinced me that these were castings, because they have a conference call, but Zulema, who, just has to document everything, she asked Lori, and, feel free to, go through this if you are so inclined. But the point that's relevant here, Lori asked Zulema, "Hi, can you text me a list of the powers we are going to use?" So I was like, whoa, I just found this week. I was like, this is the first reference I've found to their actual powers. So we know from Serena's interview that they all had different powers. Serena's was water. I highly suspect, I hadn't ever really thought about this, but someone commented on one of the A Murderous Heart videos and was like, I bet Melanie Gibbs was fire, because she was so, kind of obsessed with fire. Like, she wrote a book about it, and then she and Lori did a podcast, What is the Baptism of Fire? Just they published it the day before, or the day before Tylee was last seen. and her remains were burned in a fire. So really creepy stuff. We'll see more about this. But this was the first list I've found to date where I recognize, okay, these are more of the powers. So Lori's just casually asking Zulema, like, hey, for tomorrow's call, which powers are we using? Zulema, she just replies, crystals, vibrating fire. So fire wasn't enough. It had to be of the vibrating variety. Ice, water, lightning, wind, stormy sky, and fiery cherubim. And then Zulema follows up, I feel the ice is going to be the most critical because, as Mel said, it paralyzes them. And usually when Lori and Zulema talk about Mel, it's usually Melanie Boudreau, her niece. But also, I think this would kind of make sense. I do strongly suspect that Melanie Gibb would be anything with fire, so the vibrating fire. And most likely, Melanie Boudreau was ice. Lori, I love it. That's so good. Looking forward to talking in the morning. Oh, another reason I think that this is Melanie Boudreau is that Zulema was constantly kowtowing to Lori and trying to curry her favor. And obviously, Melanie Boudreau, she was part of the royal family in this group. So, so for Zulema to say, I feel like the ice is going to be the most critical because, as Mel said, it paralyzes them. I think that there seemed to be a little more tension between Melanie Gibb and Zulema. They both chuck each other under the bus. So I think they were more contending for like that solid number 2 spot. And in fact, their trust ratings were within a point of each other. I think one of them was like a 97 and one was a 96, I think. Anyway, okay. So Zulema, me too. It was great to see you today. Lori, I love seeing you too. How fun to have all of us together. Powerful. So it kind of sounds like the one on the 4th they actually got together for. Like there was one, they did a potluck, during it. So anyway, Zulema, yes. And then because of transformation, I've always liked that crystal. It's beautiful. I don't know what that means, but there is that reference to crystal. So who even knows with this group? Okay, May 5th. Lori saved a screenshot of a malachite stone similar to the ones in her ultimate wedding ring. Now, keep in mind, this was not her purchase of the Etsy rings. This was just a malachite stone that she found. And I think she was thinking like, oh, hey, I could have this, put in a ring. So when I had found this, however many months or a year ago, I was like, okay, she definitely has an obsession with malachite. And I did a live about the malachite, and I talked about this. But you see, this is in May. This is long before Tammy was murdered. This was even before her own husband was murdered. Again, both of them allegedly. And let me see here. Yeah, here it is. Image of malachite stone. And it was modified on May 5th. So, okay. Oh, and another point is that Kay Woodcock had said on a Facebook post that she published June 23rd in 2021 that she found evidence that Lori searched specifically for malachite wedding rings. And I thought that was really interesting. I stumbled on Loco's Amazon shopping history from 10 to 19, which included malachite wedding rings. So she wasn't just searching for wedding rings and just happened to come across malachite. Like she after already saving a screenshot of a malachite stone, then she goes on Amazon and searches for malachite wedding rings. And that wasn't right away. That wasn't until October. I'm just making the point, like, yeah, she's definitely obsessed with malachite. Okay, May 5th, another Venmo transfer. Also May 5th, they have a Zoom call that appears to be a casting. I think this is, this is, Zulema, anything that says sent, so I need to go back. If one of my mods can remind me to do this, I need to go back into the screenshot and add like their first initial. But anytime something says sent, that's Zulema, because this was Zulema's phone that they pulled. And anything that says read is either going to be Lori or Chad. Most of her interactions with Lori, she didn't have nearly as many interactions with Chad. So Zulema said, I sent you a Zoom invite on your email. Could you join us like that since the phone is not letting us? And let's see what this is. Yeah, and then it was great seeing you today. Again, you can go back, read the interaction if you're so inclined. Another Venmo. And here we have May 8th. This, again, going back to the catfishing. In this particular communication, Charles said he agreed to move out soon. I'll just read it. On May 8th, he talked about having agreed with Lori that he would move out soon. And he had actually already moved out, which we talked about that last time. But I think he probably just hadn't moved all of his stuff out, but he had moved to Houston. And so had she. Messages indicated he sent her a phone. This was the scammer. So Charles sent her a phone and was in talks to send $3,800 to someone she put him in contact with, someone who purported to be an attorney. May 11th, Charles searched for how to file for a divorce without a lawyer. And let me just pull it up. Okay. On May 11th, 2019, were numerous artifacts indicating visits to sites about how to file for divorce in Texas, including how to file without a lawyer. Throughout the time period, I noted numerous artifacts to nationallife.com, a life insurance website. The artifacts indicated an account with National Life. So when they talk about artifacts, that's different from like queries or searches. So they'll reference searches, Charles performed certain searches that they talk about, so did Lori. But when they talk about these artifacts, that means that like they actually like browsed to a particular site And so, the fact that the artifacts indicated an account, that meant that there were artifacts that he had most likely logged in. I should say that is most likely what made them think that he had an account. There were also artifacts from Fidelity and Guarantee Life. So we don't know the relevance of this. This will probably come out in the trial in Arizona when Lori is extradited to Arizona to stand trial for conspiracy to commit murder charges against Charles. That will be after Idaho. Okay. Another Venmo on the 11th and the 13th and the 15th and the 19th. The 21st, Lori told her prayer circle casting group, well, let me just open it up. 5:21, Lori tells the group that she can't do a conference call because she is being monitored and it's not safe for her. The group consisted of Zulema, Lori, Melanie Gibb, Melanie Boudreau, Serena, Christina, and Nicole. May 21st is the approximate date Brendan Gibb filed for a divorce from Melanie Gibb. This was sent to me from someone else, so it doesn't, by someone else, someone in Cool Cats, someone who's been very reliable. I haven't looked it up on the site. I had just asked her if she knew when Brendan actually filed for divorce, and this is what she sent me. So full disclosure, it doesn't have Brendan's name, but I think the one where the divorce is finalized, I think we see his name. All right, May 25th, Zulema tells Chad that Serena has stopped all her deep studies. We talked about that. I mean, obviously you're in a group and people are asking you not to study. That should be a red flag. And I don't bring these things up to shame these people. I do think that there is shame that all of these people, they now like try to backpedal, like, wasn't exactly a casting. No one can remember if they prayed for the kids, except Serena was like, I know that Lori was very concerned about her daughter, who I can't remember if she was dark or possessed. They mean exactly the same. So, like even in their backpedaling and their desperate attempts to distance themselves from these castings, they still drop clues that we can put together. And it's like, yeah, they were obviously praying for all of these victims to die, and they were using their special powers, their vibrating fire, their crystals, their water, etc., to wipe these people out, thinking that, well, they've already been overtaken, so now their only hope is to move on to the next probation, which requires that the body die. Okay, May 27th, Lori was in Phoenix visiting friends, and she did a podcast with Melanie Gibb and then met up with Zulema. So Zulema, let's see. Good morning. My kids stayed here until 10 last night. Let me zoom in a little bit for people on mobile. I didn't get to bed until super late. I have today available for us to meet at any time that's best for you. Lori said, recording a podcast right now. How about at noon? I could come over there at Melanie's now. Would that work? Zulema, noon works. I'll be ready. Perfect. Lori, on my way. Zulema, okay. So in some of these interactions, they drop clues that I'm able to then add to the timeline. Now, with anything, and I've already said this before with other videos, just because something is included in the timeline doesn't mean that it's necessarily relevant. Case in point, the Venmos, obviously, Colby and Kelsey were in financial straits. They had been relying on Charles, and Lori had to take over when they separated. And in fact, at one point, Charles even told Lori, like, hey, Colby needs to pay for the car and insurance himself. If he can't afford it, he can't have the car. He said also Tylee, and he said any money that you give them, like to help them out, that's coming out of your allowance. So Charles was sending her a certain amount of money each month, and it sounds like they had one shared account, probably their original shared account, and he was just dropping money into that. Because then he also asked her, please stop using the credit card. Okay, we already talked about that. Yeah, okay, so, and this is where Lori had told Zulema that Garrett was out of Charles for almost 2 minutes and then crawled back in. That was on May 28th, and we see on May 29th, I'm going to skip over this for a second, the next day, well, what do you know? Now, Charles is no longer Garrett. He was overtaken by Eblos, and Melanie Gibb had said Eblos was a combination of spirits. And she even said in her interview with Chandler Police, this was August 2020, that like that's why like Alex talked about how like Charles had the strength of like 1,000 men, and I'm like, oh yeah, then how did you end up with that teeny tiny boo-boo? Like if Charles had the strength of 1,000 men, like Alex would have been toast. I mean, if Charles had the strength of Charles, the guy was really strong, Alex would have been toast, especially if Charles had been wielding a bat like Alex said. Okay, but you see Lori's frame of mind here clearly when she said Garrett was out for almost 2 minutes. So apparently she was timing this and then crawled back in. She was going for an escalation. And then the same day that Garrett crawled, but came out of Charles and then crawled back in, she booked a flight from Phoenix to Salt Lake City on Delta using a fake account that she then tied to her phone number. Now, I make the point here, and you'll see it in one of the sources. I believe she was using the KKWalker75 at yahoo.com account, and you'll see why I think that. Okay, so this was her whole ridiculous email to Brother Daybell. Another thing that's kind of funny is when Chandler Police were interviewing Melanie, when they talk about this person from Aval, it's really obvious they're talking about Karen Walker, but they keep bleeping out her name. But, I mean, it's a fictional person, but okay. But here, you see here, now I'm not going to go through all of this, except, I will ruin a few songs. They talked about like their Smule account, and it noted some of the songs that were mentioned were that like Lori and Chad, like I think Lori was singing for Chad, Just Can't Get Enough, Let's Make Love, and I Dreamed a Dream. So there you go. But all right, to the point. On April 20th, I was informed, this is 2020, I have to zoom out just a little bit. Let's see, gonna have to zoom out more. I hate that I can't like just get rid of this. Let me see if I included it. Oops. 420. Oh wait, no. KK. Ah, darn it. Okay, here we go. On April 20th, I was informed by FBI analyst Nicole Heidman that Lori utilized the KKWalker75 account, and this, fits in the redaction. So that's part of the reason I think it was the KK Walker account. To book a flight from Phoenix to Salt Lake on May 28th, Lori was listed as the passenger along with her credit card number and phone number. This would further indicate that Lori established this secret account to converse with Chad Daybell and further their relationship. So Lori, these guys, they think they're so gangster, and they're so sneaky. And then she does something stupid like connects her KK Walker account with her phone number and her credit card, which is just unbelievable to me. It's just like Chad and Alex doing all of these searches while logged into their Google accounts. All right, let's see what wonders Source 2 beholds. So I talked about this last time, that Lori had logged in a total of 25 times to the KK Walker account. The first email I located was sent from kkwalker75 at Yahoo and chad.daybell at Gmail fit in there on April 21st at 6:20. Anyway, it was just another point in the FOIA docs that also talks about what I believe to be the KK Walker account. But what's amazing to me was her tying it to her phone number and her credit card. Let me move ahead here. Where was I? Okay. All right, we already talked about that one. Let me see if I open these. Yeah, we've already talked about this. So I'm not going to go into all of that, especially since it's a longer interaction. But you can always pull up the timeline and open up these screenshots. And I also talked about this in another live, but you see here, I use this to establish that Lori was the one coming up with some of these names, contrary to what Melanie Gibb. I think Zulema also said that Chad was the one who came up with the names. But here you also see, in addition to the Ned Schneider thing, which there it's kind of assumed, like how would Chad have known about, this guy, Ned Schneider, who died in 1997? But here you actually see it verified. So Lori told Zulema in a text message, perfect, I found out there are 4. One is a level, this was supposed to be level 4 entity. His name is Eblos, the H is silent. The other 3 are level 3s. Let's do this. Another thing I just found out this week was when Melanie was interviewed, in one of her interviews, she talked about like these levels, and these levels like line up with how many times someone has been to Earth. So she said someone who was a level 2 point whatever meant that they were a first creation. If you were a level 3 point whatever, then you were this was your second round. And then a level 4, you were on your third trip to Earth. And that was the point where people made covenants with one side or the other. So I don't think that they were really consistent. And you definitely see they weren't consistent with Alex by any means, because initially, and we talked about this in another live, initially Lori had said he was like a kindergartner, he was a first creation, and then when she wanted Alex to marry Zulema, then suddenly he was a multiple creation. And then I think by the time Chad bestowed him with his priesthood blessing, I think he was like a 4th or 5th creation. I think 5th, because I had made the point that Zulema had said Chad had said she was a 4th or 5th, and so I was like, I think she would have remembered which one. So I suspect she was told she was a 4th creation, and in the end, Alex was a 5th creation, and Alex Zulema kind of took umbrage at that, like she really saw herself as being more spiritual than Alex. So I think that's why she was like, I don't know, it was either fourth or fifth, but there's a lot of conjecture. I definitely veered into the conjecture lane on that one. Okay, but then 2 days later, you see Chad searching while logged into Google. It's so easy to like just use a logged out account. So it's really amazing to me just how not tech savvy these people were. Like apparently they didn't even know how to go incognito on their phone or their devices. Anyway, okay, so here he is searching 2 days later to find out what an eblos is. And so clearly Lori took the lead on this one too, and Chad was left to try to make sense of it. Now, I am not in any way minimizing Chad's involvement. Chad was absolutely despicable in his involvement, but especially this past week, after seeing like the timing of his searches for Ned Snyder followed up by Ned Schneider, and then it's like he gets the updated name and then like calls her. This was all obviously very, very contrived. If I had to say who the ringleader was, I would say it was Lori. I think that they were, I've said repeatedly, I think they fed off of each other, and there really wasn't a true ringleader. But from what I've seen in the FOIA docs, I think Lori was very much leading from behind and then having him like back her up. Like, okay, now you call me and you tell me that Charles was overtaken by Ned Schneider. Anyway, okay. May 29th, we've talked about this in other lives, but I want to talk about it in the context of this timeline because, like I said, you see things really speeding up at this point. Zulema had already said, I feel like something's going to happen to one of your family members, then followed up the next day by, I think one of her family members is actually going to die. And now, this is a few weeks later, she said, I will go in spirit when the bomb goes off, and I'll be there to see JJ's spirit to go to the presence of the Lord. Then I and the angels will protect the bodies and not allow for them to be possessed by evil. I don't think that Tylee was most likely included in that because in their minds she was already dark, and we see a very troubling reference that she makes to Tylee right after they moved to Rexburg, which confirms they did not see any hope for Tylee. Lori replied, perfect. We've already talked about this. I found out there are 4. One is a level 4 entity. His name is Heblos. The H is silent. Let's see this. Zulema, I encapsulated them with invisible hidden capsules that will close and capture them as soon as the bomb goes off and they leave the body. I also created a safe path guarded by warrior angels for Jonas to come and bind them and take them away as soon as they exit the body. That doesn't sound comforting, but I have a good feeling of this. I saw myself protecting the bodies, and this is a pretty consistent pattern with Zulema. She keeps inserting herself into this tragedy, and she sees herself very much as a protector. First, she was Lori's protector. Now she's protecting the bodies of the people who are going to be murdered. And then Lori, I could not love you more right now. You are an amazing goddess. And at one point, she even said, I couldn't do any of this without you, something to that effect. So I make the point here that I personally have never believed Melanie Gibbs' claim that Lori said like the day before Melanie visited that JJ had turned into a zombie. I think they all knew all along the plan for the kids, because we'll see where Melanie Boudreau encourages her to get life insurance on Tylee and JJ, because you never know what could happen. This was right after Charles was murdered. And I think all of these people knew the plan, that the kids were going to be gone, that Charles and Tammy were both going to die. So I think, again, they try to make things sound a little more like in the moment, so that then, like if Melanie didn't know until she actually got there, no one could say, hey, if you knew all this time that JJ was a zombie, and I mean, this is May, and Zulema's talking about ushering JJ to heaven personally, then that begs the question, why would you go out there? But, Melanie Gibb went out there, Zulema went out there, and Melanie Boudreau, and I also suspect, as I talked about in another live, Summer. I believe she was the mystery woman who went out there and was seen in the Ring camera footage on, I believe it was October 29th. Okay. And I already shared that. That was in the live about the 4 mysteries that I believe may have been solved in the FOIA docs. Okay. All right. May 29th. We already saw this interaction. She had texted Chad with more questions. Chad tells Zulema he doesn't feel good about it, especially with this ongoing dispute with Julie. May 30th, Zulema told Lori that Serena's fever is back, asked if she's being attacked. We already covered that. May 30th, Lori, now this is very interesting to me. Just a second, I'm going to get a quick drink. So this is interesting to me because Lori and Melanie Gibb were together in Utah, but it appears that Zulema didn't know about this conference. And let's just take a look at this. So I thought this was really interesting. So this is May 29th. Zulema said to Lori, I'll be at the temple in the morning about 8 a.m. in case you're going to the temple tomorrow too. Then she follows up the next day because Lori didn't reply, because I think Lori's like, uh-oh, how do I reply to this? We'll see why. Zulema asks her directly, are you busy tomorrow? I have to do reports, but I can get away to do lunch. And Lori love bombs her. I can't thank you enough for being such an amazing warrior goddess. So she doesn't answer her question initially, but she's like, oh, you're an amazing warrior goddess. And then she follows up, I would love it, but I'm out of town. I'm not going to the conference. So there was a Preparing a People conference going on at that time, but thought it was important to my friendship with Melanie to go to Utah with her, because I think Melanie was a speaker. And anyway, I'm hoping to have a reason soon to have to go back to Texas. Working on that now. By working on it, she meant trying to murder Charles with her powers. I'm told he can't stay in there more than 5 days, so it's been 2. I'm told our time bomb is in effect and it's only a matter of time and circumstance. So clearly they were all focused on, like, there was some kind of proverbial time bomb that was going to go off, and at least Charles was going to die. I think at that point, I think she may have thought Charles, at least Charles and JJ would die, and you'll see why. But, and then Lori follows up again. This was just a few minutes later. I've also found out some other great info, and your revelation yesterday about hidden entities and deeply hidden entities was the key. Multiple exclamation marks. So you can tell she's a little anxious about, like, Zulema being upset that Lori was with Melanie Gibb in Utah, because I'm sure Zulema is like, wow, how did I not know? Why didn't anyone tell me that you guys were going to Utah? Again, you are amazing, Zulema, multiple exclamation marks. I just love you so much. I could not, oh, this was where she said, I could not do all of this without you. Let's talk on the phone tonight if you can, probably after 8. Zulema, very icy response. I'll be available at 8:30 p.m. to talk. I'll text you as I get out of my meeting. So she's clearly not very happy here. But then she comes back with, I have a feeling that you will have a reason to go back very soon. I am continuing to send storms of fire, fire lightning, fireballs, and the light of Christ and the love of Heavenly Father as our biggest weapons against them. Soon, very soon. So again, this is more references to their powers. And then, we already talked about that. So this was interesting to me because now we know, and I already knew from was this? No, this wasn't. That was in February. A confidential source had told me that Lori flew out to, I think it was Salt Lake, with Melanie Gibbs. So this was a different trip. But then I saw there was preparing a people conference in Sandy, Utah, which is just outside of Salt Lake City. This was the one that Chad had canceled. So he was supposed to be a speaker, and yeah, I'll zoom in here so hopefully you guys can see it. It says here, David Warwick and Sean Littlebear will be filling in for Chad Daybell, who had a family emergency. We regret he won't be able to attend this PAP event. Well, I strongly suspect the family emergency was he was hanging out with Lori in Utah. And I'll share why. Because not yet. So June 1st, we already talked about this. This is when Chad performed 2 Google searches for Eblos. And June 2nd, Lori texted Zulema a picture of a mountain that she said that they were standing on. So let me zoom in. Okay. Okay, so this is Zulema. Oh my goodness, I was dying in testimony meeting today. The bishop went on and on about the man that takes care of the grounds for girls' camp. Not one mention of the Savior. I had to leave. Lori, it's so hard. I called you because I'm standing in the mountain where we did, I think that's supposed to be the ordinance, whatever that means. I had you put the healing, love, and light into her. I cried. It was touching, so much better than church. And then Lori obviously sends a picture. This is where I'm standing. So, and then Zulema needs clarification. The ordinance to help the earth have the earthquake? Because she's fixated on earthquakes. And Lori replies, reading visions of glory is better than church. This was Zulema. Reading visions of glory is better than church. And Zulema again, that's a beautiful view. So Lori didn't clarify if the ordinance was to help the earth have the earthquake. So, one point I wanted to make here. Is I suspect that Lori was with her at this time. I think there was another. Yeah, I'm going to hop over this because on June 3rd, so she flew out sometime before or on May 30th, and then she flew back to Houston to be with Charles and referred to him as the literal demon. She said flying home to, and then a typo, the literal demon he is still fine as of this morning. And this was after they had this whole exchange, which we'll circle back to. But the indictment also said through text messages between Lori and Charles that were seen on Charles' phone, Lori would return to Texas on June 3rd. So we know that she returned on June 3rd. Okay, circling back to June 2nd, let's zoom in a little bit here. Okay, so on June 2nd, so this is the day before she returns, she is thinking, like, Charles is going to die. He has to die. She has to have this reason to return to Houston. And we've talked about this before, but again, I'm just going to read it in the context of where we are in the timeline. Also, I really try not to operate under the assumption that anyone has seen a previous live. So this is June 2nd, and Lori and Zulema have this absolutely bizarre, feverish exchange where they're trying to murder Charles and JJ with their powers. Lori: yes, he does. Let's put some fire energy toward Eblos now. He is driving now, and today is the day. I think she meant to say, you and I can do it spiritually. Let's go to him and hover over the truck till we do it. Are you ready? And I think we know from this one that, Charles was driving let's zoom in a little bit. This time frame was the time Charles was in Texas with JJ. Lori and Zulema shared the following text string. But there's another reference where they actually, Charles and Lori have an exchange, and Charles had told her he was taking JJ to some beach near them. So that's why Lori knew that he was going to be on the road with JJ, and the police report even notes that JJ would have been in the car with him at the time that they had this exchange. So, Zulema: I'm ready. Lori: let's go now. Zulema: that is powerful. I'm still sending fire. Lori: yes, it is. I'm blinding him with light. Zulema: oh, that's awesome. Lori: I'm feeling it big time. Raphael is with us. And I did I talked about this a little bit in Cool Cats. I need to put a post out on A Murderous Heart about Raphael. Raphael is Chad. That is established in the FOIA docs. There are several references to Raphael, but I think one of his phones, he actually referred to himself as Raphael. Also, when he has that bizarre love story that he texts Lori throughout the day one day, like I noticed at the end of the story, like, you know, he was James, so it was supposed to be James and Elena, or Elena, or however that was pronounced, and he just changed James' name to Raphael. I think it was at the very end of the story, which was a weird thing. But it actually said in that particular screenshot that they refer to themselves as James and Elena, as well as Raphael and Lily. It's Lili, which I thought was interesting because there's just one more variation of, like, Lori was Lolo, and we know from one of the references in the FOIA docs that Lala was the nickname they had for Laura, who was the Cox baby who died in infancy. So it's already very unusual that they would have a baby who died whose name was Laura, and then Lori is born and they name her so similarly. But then to find out, like, Laura was referred to as Lala, Lori was Lolo, and now in this, like, little exchange they have, it's Raphael and Lili, Lili. Very weird. Okay, Zulema, I feel him. Lori, did he leave? Zulema, I can't see him. I felt like I was chasing him because I saw me running after someone. Lori, get him. Zulema, oh, I'm chasing. Lori, you are amazing, lady. I love you. Zulema, I'm tired now. LOL. Lori, me too. I'll keep the light and fire going till he's gone. Zulema, me too. I'm still sending it. And then Lori sends 3 emojis. Okay. And then, like, Lori sent Zulema a text. Like, letting her know he's still alive. She's clearly disappointed. She's crushed. She has to, fly back anyway. But then the day that she gets back, she texts Zulema a call to war at 9:30 p.m. Just got home and got JJ to sleep. Let's go spiritually tonight and work on him. We give the timing to the Lord, but we don't need to relent. This is war. Okay, June 4th. Lori tells Zulema that Raphael is always with her. No, they misspell Raphael here. I think Zulema misspelled it first. Lori didn't reply with the spelling. It's just, well, I'll read it. Zulema, I was exhausted when I woke up this morning. This is after they were up late at, the temple or teleporting, however they were together. We must have been battling all night last night. I thought I felt your presence. Oh, so she was at the temple. At the temple this morning. No. Okay, so it looks like she went to the temple the next morning, the 4th. I thought I felt your presence at the temple this morning. A female presence full of light came to me. Lori replies, it was a battle. It's been never ending lately. I did come to you this morning. We are visiting parts of the earth to begin the healing process, which will allow her to be terrestrial in time. Clearly some typos and some mental illness. Zulema, okay, your light is so bright, always blowing sunshine up her skirt. Then Zulema asks, was Raphael with you? And Lori replied, always. We are never apart, just in percentage. Zulema, I felt him too. Lori, this is basically, to me, this comes across as like, okay, Zulema, calm down. You get your own man. Just like you and your eternal companion, we have 120% of spirit and we split it. That way, part of our spirit is always together. Zulema, that is so cool. Lori, I think it's the only reason we agree to come back. Zulema, yeah, I can see that. Zulema, who would want to come here? It's so dark and evil here. We were valiant warriors for sure. Lori, you can say that again. Really dark, disturbing stuff. Also, June 4th, Charles searches for how to delete messages from a Mac. Let's see here. On June 4th, 2019 were queries about how to delete messages from a Mac, followed with steps to disable iMessage. After that were artifacts about using WhatsApp. So my interpretation here, just trying to connect the dots. I think when Lori came back, she was most likely very bellicose, because I've talked about this before. Lori has no internal editor, so whatever is running through her mind spills out of her mouth, and so I suspect exchanges were pretty tense enough that now Charles is starting to kind of cover his tracks. So he wants to delete the messages from his Mac, most likely in the event that Lori accesses his computer, and he wants to disable iMessage altogether and switch to WhatsApp. And I'm assuming he'd probably only use that on his phone. In fact, I don't think you can, I'm not even sure. I have WhatsApp for a team in the UK I work with, but I'm not even sure there is a desktop version. Maybe. I've never used it. So, okay. But it was interesting to me that, at least it's not noted in the FOIA docs, that he didn't take these additional steps when she moved in with him in April. It was when she came back from this trip. Okay, so June 9th, Lori we know she's in in Arizona, because she met up with Zulema. Let's just open it up. Okay, that's a PDF. Oh yeah, it's multiple pages, so I had to save it as a PDF. That's why the highlights are pink. All right. Oops. Come on. Okay, so this is Zulema. I have a call with Julie. This was most likely Julie Clement in 15 minutes. So I'll text you when I'm off the phone with her. That was June 4th. June 7th. We're leading up to this, because what was the date? June 9th. So on June 7th, Zulema said, Julie said most likely she can meet with us Sunday. Yay. And then also June 7th, this was Lori. That's great about Julie. Can we do it at your house? So this sounds like this was like their potluck that they had. Zulema, yes, we can. And this is Zulema. Let's do dinner too. I'll make something, and then everyone can bring something too. Lori, perfect. We will break our fast together. So apparently they were fasting for this one. Probably to have more power so that they could kill Eblos. Then on June 9th, Julie just confirmed, and she can be here with us. Food smells delicious here. Can't wait to see you. And this is how I kind of like put together who was, at least some of the people who were there. Lori said, I invited my brother, who is a multi-creation. So this was when she announced that that for the first time that Alex was a multi-creation. I feel like we need to teach him, and we need some, I think she meant male energy. Is that okay with you? And Zulema, of course, I like him. He's funny. I agree. We need the men too. And but I don't know. I think Jimmy was, I think a boyfriend or a husband who had died. I think. I'm pretty sure. Okay. All right. And then that was her address. Okay. Venmo on the 12th and the 13th. On the 14th to the 16th, Zulema traveled to Rocky Point, Mexico to, quote, work on the earth and tell the oceans, I give you power and a commandment to cleanse and clean the earth. Apparently, cleansing alone doesn't get the job done. You have to need to clean it. And then her re-entry into the U.S. is documented in a report that was collated by the FBI. So I'll just open it up, and you can read that at your will. And this, you see June 16th, crossed into United States at Lukeville, Arizona. 16th, a Venmo. June 17th. So yeah, on June 17th, Charles told a redacted Gmail account that Lori still did not want a divorce, but doesn't want me. Around that time, he FedEx mailed $1,000 on a Visa gift card to a name that this person provided as being a friend who would receive money on her behalf. That was the 17th. On the 19th, Charles, it says on June 19th, he commented to her that he was going through some things with Lori. It's just touchy. And this is really heartbreaking because like he's pouring out his heart to this person. He's thinking this is a real woman, and they actually make plans to meet up for her. He thought she was actually flying into Phoenix, and he went to the airport and she wasn't there. And so he's like kind of pouring out his heart, but then, just being bilked for thousands of dollars, a phone, who knows what else. Okay. Also, the 19th, Zulema texted Lori about, meeting up in the temple to work on Eblos. Said, and can you meet me at the temple this morning? I have time tomorrow and we can work on Heblos. You can open that up and look for it. This was one thing I should note. I've talked about this in other lives. The unredacted affidavit is fully verified. In fact, I did an entire live where I just read through the completely unredacted affidavit of probable cause that came out of Chandler, because initially when they released it, it was very heavily redacted, but then it was left completely unredacted in the police report. So I actually took it kind of line by line from the police report and dropped it into the redactions. And that's just more for the sake of transparency so people can see, these really do fit. Excuse me. June 20th, Lori leaves Charles again and moves into her rental home. This date was provided by his landlord in a Facebook post that he later deleted. I do have a screenshot of it, but I don't really feel comfortable sharing most screenshots that were shared inside a private Facebook group. Also on the 20th, let's see, on this day, this was another interaction he had with the scammer. Charles made comments about how he and Lori were no longer friends and that she would not speak ill of him, but she did not understand him. The 21st, next day, Lori performed a web search to research Social Security disability. This has been pretty heavily covered, but they make the point here that she wouldn't have known how much she was going to get. She relayed that to Chad unless she had done a search and that was confirmed. So it says, after JJ and Tylee disappeared, Lori continued to collect Social Security. As indicated above, she even informed Chad Daybell of her monthly benefit. In using the keyword Social Security in both iCloud accounts, so that's most likely her Lori for Style and her Lolly Time account. Let's see. I learned that Lori conducted a web search for Social Security on June 21st. This search was linked to, that looks like it's most likely the Lori for Style account. The URL for this search took her to a benefits estimator. Such a search would indicate her plan prior to Charles' death. According to the calendar on the most likely Lori for Style account, Lori had an appointment with the Social Security Administration on August 12th at 13:30. This appointment was in Apache Junction, Arizona. Also on the 21st, Charles commented that he was packing her things to take to Arizona on Sunday. Also on the 21st, that I already covered. That's a duplicate. Alex Cox enters the conversation about Charles, aka Eblos. I'm not sure what that one was. I should probably go back and add more detail about that. Okay. Let me zoom in. On June 22nd, Alex Cox entered the conversation. Oh, that was it. He just entered the conversation regarding Eblos. Oh, yeah. No, here we go. Alex started to text Zulema this was his number. Through a search warrant, this number was identified as belonging to Alex Cox. On June 22nd at 7:02, Alex sent Zulema a message. Hey, Zulema, it's Alex. And, yeah, so there's no actual conversation on that date. Like, they don't include the details of what he said about Eblos. Yeah, so that's a little weird. Maybe that will come up in that particular trial. I'm sure it will. And this was also the first time that Alex and Zulema make phone contact, as evidenced by, hey, Zulema, it's Alex. Okay. And on the 23rd, in this particular communication, he revealed he was driving to Arizona to bring Lori her belongings. On 6/23, he commented he was driving to bring Lori items in Arizona in a house he had leased there. The 24th, and also, like, how generous is he? Like, she moves back in. She's still back and forth to, Arizona and Utah. And then he gets her a house in Chandler and, like, brings her stuff to her. But I think at that point he also just wanted her out. Let's see. I wonder if this is... Oh, yeah. So this verified that she moved to that location on the 24th, but the landlord... So the landlord might have been referencing when they actually started paying. Who knows? On the 26th, redacted Gmail address asked what Charles was doing. Charles replied, fighting a crazy train who I'm married to until I can get the hell out. It's stunning what she's trying to do to other people in our family. Driving back to Texas tomorrow and into your arms. Can't wait. It was clear from communications recent to this, and they had still not met in person. June 26th, Charles texted Adam to ask if they could talk, and they have a phone conversation shortly thereafter. And this just confirms it. You can pause the video and read that if you want. June 27th, Zulema texted Lori at 10:18 a.m. And to ask if Charles could be redeemed. So this is when she sent the text, do you think there is a way to change Eblos to the light? I think that this was just her in CYA mode. Also, June 27th, according to Melanie then Boudreau's father, Steve Cope, Melanie asked Brandon for a divorce while they were at their house. So they were at Steve and his wife's house for vacation, and that is where Melanie decided to ask Brandon for a divorce, which is absolutely bizarre. Okay, so the following is a summary of what Stephen told me. Melanie and Brandon were at his house located at, at Salem, Utah. Melanie and Brandon were visiting. He believes it was June 27th at 2. And so this is 2 in the morning. Brandon, who was at the house at the time, called Steve's cell phone and asked him to come downstairs. Melanie told her father she wanted a divorce from Brandon. Brandon was in shock and didn't understand. Stephen spoke with them separately. This is, well, I'll just read it. While Stephen was speaking with Melanie, she showed him a video and said Brandon was gay. The video was of Brandon on a work trip in Atlanta, Georgia. The video depicted another male dancing with Brandon along with several other people partying. She based this information off the video and a vision she had at the temple in Arizona. Stephen questioned Melanie about how she knew this was the truth. Melanie told him she was praying about it in the temple when she had a vision. The vision was of a meter. The meter went from 0 to G, G meaning gay. Melanie described how she saw the meter go all the way to G, and that is how she knew. Stephen questioned the validity of this information. Melanie cut him off from discussing the issue further by saying, I had my revelation, you get your own. Stephen spoke with Brandon. Brandon described the video as a work trip. Brandon was the designated driver for the group. Brandon said it was a work-related get-together and that he is not gay. This concluded the information about the conversations between Steve, Melanie, and Brandon about the divorce. Whew. And Brandon said, I thought I had a happy marriage, so it was pretty overwhelming. That was in an interview that he did pretty early on in the case. All right, June 27th. This was when Charles drove to the airport in Texas, most likely the Houston airport, and found out that the scammer hadn't boarded the plane. Messages on June 27th showed Charles went to the airport to meet redacted Gmail address and found she never boarded. On the same day, Charles sent Adam Cox a link with information about being a translated being. This was their interaction. Let's see. In reviewing Charles Vallow's phone, there was obvious turmoil in the months leading up to his death. Communications in the phone showed that each of them was accusing the other of infidelity. On February 23rd, Charles sent Lori an email. In this email, Charles explained that he had not been unfaithful and was willing to take a polygraph and hire a private investigator to clear his name of any wrongdoing. In many of Charles' text messages to Lori, his tone was very loving and supportive. From February of 2019 to June of 2019, Charles articulated interest in working on their marriage and not filing for a divorce. This all seemed to change in June of 2019. On June 26, Charles Vallow sent a text to Adam. I love how they redact Cox, but then put in parentheses Lori's brother. They do this quite a bit. Asking if he could chat. The two of them had a phone conversation. On June 27th, Charles sent Adam a link that talked about a translated being and about traveling to other dimensions. Charles told Adam that this was what Lori had been talking about extensively. Subsequent text messages expressed the opinion that Lori was ruining people's lives, to include Brandon. Charles stated that Lori needed to be stopped before she ruined other marriages. Also, June 28th, this was when Lori created the alias email in Charles Vallow's name and sent Chad an invitation to stay in their home. This has been pretty well documented, so you can check that out if you are so inclined. That same day, Charles and Adam have a text message where Adam tells Charles he already told his mom that they had to have a family meeting when Charles wanted them to include someone whose name was redacted and Gabe Bonilla. Actually, you know what? There's so much happens in these next couple of days. I'm going to pick up here in the next live. Plus, it's getting late. So next week, we will pick up here. Like I said, so much happens these last couple days in June and then in July leading up to Charles' murder. As always, if you have any questions, drop them in the comments below. I do check in pretty regularly, and have a great night.